Welcome to the last installment of DiversiTV. My name is Mark Harris. We have been going these 8 weeks on a different topic of diversity as defined by LCC. This is our first season, that is winter term. We'll be starting up again with a new slate of guests and a new slate of topics next term. As it is, just to recap the schedule, just to look over the last 8 weeks. Today we are on week 8, which is a youth perspective focus. And one of the reasons that we look at youth as a diversity category, going along with our purpose, is basically the DiversiTV is to give the mic and shed light to those that don't usually get the mic and to give voice. To start simple and work towards a common understanding. So much of our perceptions about youth are formed by, shall we say, adults/corporate media, and generally deal with the problems of youth, problems posed by youth activities, usually negative, or often focus as youth as a market. So youth are mentioned by omission. For example, the state of the global village. If you've ever seen this report, if the globe were reduced, all the people on the planet were reduced to a 100-person village, then 80 would live in substandard housing, 67 adults live in the village, and half of them would be illiterate, 50 would suffer from malnutrition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in that, the second statistic, 67 adults live in the village. That means that 33 are youth. That is, a third of the planet are youth. And they aren't necessarily mentioned except, again, as markets or as, faceless victims or whatever. When I actually did try and look at the rest of this question, for example, in this 100-person community, 7 people would own an automobile, some of them more than one. 5 people would possess 32% of the entire village's wealth, and those would all be from the USA. The poorest 1/3 of the people would receive only 3% of the income of the village. That's planetary-wide. That means youth make a substantial part of that. Following is also something to ponder. If you woke up this morning healthy, you are more blessed than the million who will not survive this week, many of them children, most of those children actually. If you have never experienced the danger of battle, the fear and loneliness of imprisonment, the agony of torture, or the pain of starvation, you are better off than 500 million people in the world. Following is also something to ponder. If you have food in the refrigerator, clothes on your back, a roof overhead, a place to sleep, you are more comfortable than 75% of the people in the world. If you have money in the bank, in your wallet, and spare change in a dish somewhere, you're among the top 8% of the world's wealthy. So certainly from an adolescent perspective, if you had an allowance this week, definitely you are one of the richest people on the planet. So if you can read this, you're more blessed than over 2 billion people in the world who cannot read at all. So when considers our world from such a compressed perspective, it becomes evident and vital that education, acceptance, and compassion are essential for the progress of humankind. When I attempted to do a youth focus, what came up in Google from a global focus is gender inequality. So working towards gender equality is when women and men share equally in rights, resources, and opportunities. Achieving equality between women and men will help to overcome poverty for everyone. So one of the pieces that focus on youth is the fact that since if a third of a planet is in fact children, they don't necessarily get a voice unless they are able to organize themselves or people organize in their behalf, and those people are usually women that do that. So in order to look at a local focus, one of the things that I wanted to do was focus with the Wayne Morse Youth Program, specifically with their free speech activities. And so to that end, their activities in terms of giving youth a voice when it's so easy to silence them. So our guests tonight are Iana Matthews-Harris and Ishi Medeiros Woods, who are co-managers of the Wayne Morse Youth Program. Welcome.
Thank you.
What is the Wayne Morse Youth Program, in case people who are seeing this broadcast have been living in a cave somewhere and haven't seen the headlines?
Well, the Wayne Morse Youth Program is a grassroots organization focused on empowering youth through arts, civics, and education. So basically, we're hood, grassroots. You know, we're small base, working on getting grants and everything, but we're local young people and trying to make positive change in the community. And through Civics brings in the piece about Wayne Morse, and if, in my opinion, Wayne Morse is the one old dead white guy that people actually want to learn about in history. He is pretty much the best senator I think that we've ever had. He voted against the war. He was for the people. He was a positive person in politics, which is few and far between these days, excuse me. And so we're trying to kind of bring his teachings back to today's culture, which is know your Constitution, know your rights, you know, be well versed in these things that, you know, make up our government and our world as we know it today. So that's huge as far as youth empowerment, is really understanding what our rights are, even though we're technically lesser citizens.
And the Wayne Morse Youth Program embodies the spirit of Wayne Morse. And so we're trying to really assemble all the local talent and trying to work together as far as, you know, getting some positive scene in Eugene, making it green, if you may, and in hopes, you know, for a more sustainable future, because it is the youth's future.
When you both mentioned civics, so and the fact that, well, at least from your perception, very few people learn about Wayne Morse in history. Certainly, you know, studying, as I and my partner Sherry have noted, in terms of local history, very few people actually learn about local history or even Oregon history beyond a certain point. What are the features that you discovered about Wayne Morse that, you know, made him attractive, besides, you know, a free speech plaza that, you know, at the county courthouse?
Well, he is, in my opinion, a local hero that is often forgotten. He was in town for around 40 years. He lived here, and the last part of his life, he was a farmer. So he almost loved his awards he got from the state fair more than the ones he got for politics, which is a nice, you know, personable way to look at him. He was pretty incredible in that he kept his farm going, you know, took care of his animals and everything, but also was, you know, going back and forth, doing things with the politics, going to Washington, D.C. and everything. He was also the youngest dean of the law school, of Oregon Law School ever. He was 30, I believe, 31 when he was a dean, and that's pretty huge as far as youth empowerment, although, you know, 30 isn't necessarily a youth, but at the same point, it's definitely powerful.
It is if you're 52.
It is if you're 52, all right.
He really believed in open, clean government. He exercised the same morals in his family as he would, you know, talking to any politician. He really believed in all cards on the table. And that's what Wayne Morse and the spirit of Wayne Morse is about.
And in town here, we have multiple places that are named after him. Part of the law school, there's the Wayne Morse Center for Law and Politics that's named after him. We have the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza that, you know, we kind of are bringing the Wayne Morse spirit there. We're one of the only people that actually are, the only people in town, really. Then there's also his old farm, which is out in the southern part of town, and it's 28 acres, I believe, of part of it is a dog park, part of it is a nature restoration place, and part of it is open for community to come and gather there. So he's definitely a legacy in this town, but at the same time, I didn't hear about him until a few years ago when I got involved with the program. So he's definitely not taught about, and we're trying to change that up a bit.
What led you to participate in this program? Because obviously it must have been running before you got there.
Yeah, it's been going on for about 15 years now, actually. And I got involved through Free Speech Open Mic, actually brought me in. I'm a spoken word and poet, hip-hop artist, and I went down to the Saturday market and saw this open mic at the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza. And so I got involved by doing my poetry, and eventually I started helping them set up and take down. And then a year later, Victor Stathakis, who's the chair of our board and actually knew Wayne Morse himself, he was his driver for the last years of his life, he was like, hey, you want to be the co-manager with Ishi? And I said, sure. You know, let's do it. I want to make positive change, so that's how I got involved.
I was involved about 2 years before I became the co-manager of the Wayne Morse Youth Program, and I actually helped Victor remodel his house and actually build on an addition. And so he saw me, you know, take an interest, and I've actually been playing in some local bands and really been promoting, you know, the youth scene in Eugene. And so he was just, you know, seeing my interest in it. He said, hey, you know, you want to be a part of you know, you want to be the co-manager? And I'm like, that'd be an honor, Victor. And so that was something that was very a big part of, you know, what we're doing now. And like, he kind of considers me as being like the pulse, the person who's, you know, holding it together as far as, you know, facilitating and bringing all the talent together and trying to, you know, create some venue and being, as he would say, empresario of Eugene.
Impresario.
Yes.
So what all, as co-managers, what all is in your job description? What do you do? What's a typical day or typical week or a day in the life of Wayne Morse Free Speech?
That is actually something that's somewhat shifting. Honestly, there was no job description. Like I said, we're grassroots, and grassroots often means some organized in a different way, I'll say. So we didn't have we didn't have a job description. We're not getting paid. We haven't, you know, we get paid through the soul, which works, you know. But basically what we're working on at this point is differentiating the program from life, because at this point, up until now, Ishi and I have been just living and making it happen as far as networking, talking to friends and musicians and people that we don't know, going out to places, finding talent, you know, working on the free speech thing, but it's been a part of our life. So now we're realizing that in order to get grants, we have to separate that and clock in and clock out and really, you know, which is somewhat of a struggle for grassroots organizers, but we can do it.
Boundaries and all that kind of stuff. Right?
Basically youth outreach. I mean, what I'm doing every day is I'm trying to build community. And if that means, you know, if a youth is walking by, I'm connecting with them, and I'm trying to make that you know, connection in hopes that we can, you know, do some more positive things as far as, like, you know, creating beautiful music, hooking them up with the local talent, to help them do the things that they want to do. And so that's part of my job. And then, like she says, you know, it's been kind of like an everyday thing in my life. So it's not like something where I clocked in and say, okay, I work this many hours a day doing this, and you know, it's pretty much throughout my life. And so right now, as Iana just put it, we're solidifying some of that stuff.
Which is a big part of our job description at this point is, like, I'm our official grant writer right now, although I don't have much experience. I've written 2 so far. We've gotten 1 of them, so that's positive.
Good.
So that's a huge part of it that we're working on, is that kind of the business aspect of it. And that's one of the struggles I think that youth organizers have. I mean, I'm 19, you know, he's 23, and we don't have the most experience in this type of thing, in the business side of it. We can get the youth there, you know, we can make a hot show, but as far as getting the funding coming in and working out budgets and all of these more bureaucratic things, it's harder for us. So we're working on really incorporating that into our facilitation skills.
There's a lot of stuff we're doing, but we're also, you know, not so more worried about, like, what we're gonna do. You know, we're more in the moment and trying to make it happen and to create some kind of, you know, positive, ongoing relationship, you know. So.
But often the challenge that you might find, and you probably have discovered this, even, you know, having written a grant and, you know, received some money, is that the people who are willing to give you money want not only bang for their buck, but they want specific things that you're going to do and tied to specific activities when you're on the clock. Mm-hmm. You know, so for example, when you're talking about civics, well, part of civics is not only knowing how to act, but how to act in different situations, and also understanding that there's a history that was there before you. Because a lot of times when you're working with a bureaucracy, bureaucracies have histories, they have cultures, they have, you know, things that may be difficult to perceive if you don't, for example, have the background to deal with that, or even the conceptual framework to deal with that. You know, I mean, for example, when you said, you know, I'm not calling you to task, but just pointing out, okay? So Wayne Morse, you know, greatest senator, you know, there are some people that would say, well, what about Hatfield? What about, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And, you know, not to take away anything from either of them, because they both have buildings named after them. and they both took anti-war stances, and they, that were based on principles. Both graduates of, Oregon law schools and things like that. So what part of your daily activities in terms, or even weekly activities with youth, involve teaching them that history, teaching them public speaking skills, civics, working, the grunt work of dealing with a bureaucracy, which is often, not like putting on a hot show. It actually takes some sweat. Not that I'm one to talk about that, but.
Right, it's not so much about the shows. I mean, the show is one aspect of it. That's just one part of it. But the actual organizing and education is year-round. And we're still kind of new at it, and we're still kind of getting started. And we're getting to the point where, Victor Stathakis, he's a genius. He's a professor at the Constitution and at Civics. And so he's going to be starting to educate some of these new youth that are coming into the program, and to better help them understand what it's about in the spirit of Wayne Morris. Because really, it's the spirit. As much as it is, knowing about, the Constitution and about everything else, it's the spirit, it's the morals. It's standing up for what you believe in. And the youth aren't given that opportunity, and they've been shunned, upon, and they haven't been able to express themselves. And so we're trying to empower them by showing them that we're here. And then after we do that, after we establish that, then we offer education, civics, arts, and education, through whatever they want to learn.
And we actually have, I wrote up a curriculum last spring for a project that we have under our belt, which is the School Without Walls. And it's the concept of education taking many forms, whether it's apprenticeship, whether it's mentorship, or some private lessons, group classes. There's many different ways people can educate themselves. And a big portion of the School Without Walls project is that government aspect, which is know your history, of course, because that, that teaches you where it is now, but also being able to take the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, these things, and almost translate them into present day, because that's pretty necessary at this point. You read the Constitution, I consider myself pretty intelligent, but a lot of the words just aren't in my vocabulary necessarily, or because this youth culture, there's a global youth culture that is just from being, raised in the late 80s to, 2000s, and that's something that we have to adjust our things for. Like one of the youth in our program, Ari, has a poem that says the new generation needs a new constitution, and in a way I really believe that. And so one of the projects that we're working on also is taking those founding documents and keeping true to them, but taking them in and then putting them out in a way that is approachable and it's easily accessible to today's youth, which maybe is putting a funky beat behind it, maybe getting a nice bass line in there, maybe making it rhyme. There's a lot of different ways that we can do that, but really that accessibility is something which is why I think a lot of young people aren't involved in their government, because simply they don't understand it. You go to a board meeting and the stuff they're saying, they're talking about all these things that it's almost a different language. And so it's really necessary to not necessarily dumb it down, but just translate it. Literally, some youth almost need a translation.
I believe that the Constitution should be something that is able to change for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of the corporations. I think it's something that primarily is, there's a lot of people who would understand it, like she said, if it was explained to them in people terms, Me, I'm coming from the spiritual side of it, and I'm learning the academia side.
I think that, the issues you raise about vocabulary, history, and things like that are perennial. That means that they're like the grass, dies back in the winter, down to the roots, and then comes back, because you never entirely kill off the grass roots, so it's always there. Hate to sound like an old fart, but I remember at 52, when I remember being 30 and realizing, wait a minute, there was one time that I thought that I wasn't even going to live to be 30, Because the world was going to, die in a nuclear holocaust or whatever, and been waiting for that holocaust since at least 1976 or whatever, ecological collapse, et cetera, et cetera. So here we are, 30, and then all of a sudden I become a father in my 30s, and then boom, 20 years later, we still have some of the same problems. So when we talk about, you go to a meeting and they're speaking bureaucratese, okay, which is a branch of English, right? Just like in the medical community, we're speaking scientific English, right?
Yeah.
And so if I tell you something like enantiodromia, okay, which is actually a long word in the dictionary, but it means simply one of three things. One, it literally means that which arises out of its opposite, okay? So problems create solutions. So solution comes out of the problem. Then the solutions, the second meaning, create new problems. And then the third, the problem might be the way you are seeing the problem. Okay? So, for example, as applied to youth, from an adult perspective, having been involved with this a lot as a youth and also as an adult, it's like youth need more guides on the side than sages on the stages, right? In terms of speaking that language and, we'll just let you youth work on this little project and we'll handle the adult money part of it, which is often one of the things that you often find, especially with federal grants or dealing with institutions like the county. So one of the things that I know that you ran into some, shall we say, political problems with the county to put it nicely. So my observation would be that, well, if you had been an evangelical Christian youth group running free speech, if they would do that, but if you had been an evangelical Christian group running free speech, you probably wouldn't have run into the problems that you did.
Most likely not.
Well, I believe that anything can be talked about. If they were to come up to me, and if they're civic-minded, and they were to come up to me and talk to me, the county commissioners or whoever was in charge of shutting down the power, and talk to me about it, we would have been able to come to some kind of understanding and agreement on something. And just finding those common grounds, that's just starting there is the basis for building community. And then from there, we can go. But I feel like it was just something like, oh, you're youth, shut up, sit down, do as you're told, pull the plug. Because we weren't given that, they didn't let us in on any of the talks or any of the decision making about pulling the power. They just pulled it. And so that is an example of how the youth are being treated today.
And it's frustrating because we were all trying to do the same thing, really, which is the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza is a positive place, has the potential to be a positive place, but often some negative things do go on there. And that is something that, with all the talks about downtown Eugene and all these things, it's always focused on the youth. Those kids down there, they've got funny colored hair and they're doing drug deals and they're talking about sex and this whole culture that's so negative about youth. And I'm not about to promote it necessarily, but what we were
the negative culture.
The negative culture,
right.
Yes. I mean, I don't think that people should be out there. The alcohol, cigarettes, all these things are being abused by youth, and I personally, I believe it's wrong. But at the same time, I'm going to be welcoming to those people and realize that they have their story to tell too. They are doing these drugs, they are doing these negative things, vandalizing, whatever, for a reason, whether they know it or not, but they deserve to have their voice heard. And so basically we were coming at it with, here, we're gonna do our open mic, we're gonna make it open for everyone. We have 2 rules, keep respect and keep it clean for the kids. Pretty simple, say whatever you want, stay respectful, Make sure the little ones, that the parents feel comfortable having their kids around. And so we made it open to anyone, and we were bringing focus to the plaza. Instead of having all the riffraff or whatever, they wanted to call it
Not
up
your
there.
word, but...
Not my word, but that's that's a word that came up in the meetings that when we finally made them bring us to the table about this issue. We were providing a focal point. So we were really, I'm not going to say the only positive thing going on, but we were a huge positive force. And they, unknowingly, trying to make that plaza better, took out the only thing that was really bringing a positive civic free speech, Wayne Morse focus to the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza. And it ended up, I'm sorry, I just have one more thing, but it ended up being a really positive thing because the man that was actually responsible for pulling the plug, you know, he did it because he thought he was doing a good thing. And for a while, he was our bad guy, you know. It's like, you're silencing us, you know, felt really constraining. And for about 5 months, it took us about 5 months to get to the table with him and realize that he was a human. And, like, you know, we wanted the same thing. We could work it out. We got the electricity back, or we got the right to pay them for electricity back. And I know.
Not to put a too fine a point on it.
Bottom line.
You already had a contract when they pulled the plug.
Exactly.
Right. So bottom line, we always kept it clean for the kids. We always kept it something that they could come to and speak their mind. And, you know, it was civil, you know. There was some people who were cursing and some people who, you know, we had to, quite frankly, turn down the mic or kindly escort them off the stage. But there was nothing really too bad there. And a lot of the bad energy came when the police got in the mix, because then ultimately it's you versus us, and then you get into these battles of you know, this guy's over here doing something that, you know, is illegal, and the police come in and there it is, negative, and then it gets bigger and escalates and all this stuff, and it doesn't need to happen that way. There needs to be some cooperation there.
It came to a point where in our struggle to get the microphone back, we were saying, why? You know, and they said, oh, because there's illegal activity going on. That's why we cut it off. So we said, well, give us a cop. I ain't never seen a cop down there before. You know, let's get an officer friendly, which is something that they tried in the 13th area near campus, which is somebody who knows the neighborhood, who's going to come up and be respectful to people, but, you know, make sure that everybody's abiding by the laws. And so we asked, you know, give us an officer friendly. Why not try that at the Plaza? And what ended up happening is we got about 10 or so, you know, cops that came in and did the whole, you know, scare tactic thing, which, I mean, I understand.
You mean they were like standing with...
Like a line of 9 police officers.
Eugene police officers?
Yeah, standing there, and it's not approachable. And so, you know, Mishi and I would come up and we'd say, hello, you know, I'm co-manager. You know, we're gonna meet you. This is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a positive thing. Thank you for being out here. Much respect to you and everything. And, you know, the cops, they were okay once we talked to them, but the average person down there is so used to being profiled by police just because they look scruffy or whatever it is.
I've been profiled several times.
He was
some goatee, you know, long hair. I mean, I was harassed by one of the police
many
officers.
Many of us are subject to harassment by the police for how we look or whatever.
Of course, I mean, it's a common thing. Yeah.
So the interesting thing, you know, with all your descriptions there is knowing that, okay, there's illegal activity going down there, you know, as part of the Saturday market. Okay, there are people that are doing drugs behind the Christian Pray booth, you know. So it's like, how come they aren't getting the harassment that you are? I mean, nobody's doing illegal activities around your mic. It's back behind there. And again, as citizens, it is not your responsibility to provide police services.
Right.
Okay, that's not part of your contract.
Although we could probably do it better than
well,
police,
then you could write a grant and have that as part of, you know, we'll do security, or we'll do, you know, basically a kind of Curtis Sliwa type of, you know, I forgot the name of that group in New York that patrols the subways and stuff like that. Guardian Angels. Right. So, I mean, again, you know, assuming that, oh, you're doing the illegal activity, but that's not connected with you.
It wasn't whatsoever. It was, I mean, it was the only way that you could at all draw a connection was that we're open to everyone. So, I mean, I guess you could use that as a connection, just because we want to empower, you know, the junkie almost as much as we want to empower the straight-A student, you know, because more likely than not, they need it more. You know, but I think the frustrating thing that happened with the police, and maybe why the resistance came up, was because we offered that open mic venue. So when somebody was being harassed by the police, which happens on a regular basis, you know, in this town often, especially by the young people that, you know, look like homeless kids that are stragglers, they'd come up and we'd say, oh, you can share your story on the mic. You know, we'd allow them to speak on the mic about that. And I mean, I don't know. I think maybe it almost jeopardizes the control that people feel, because here we are just trying to empower people, let everyone hear their voice, and it's a positive thing, I think, but when that ends up getting really political, there's a lot of stuff going on in the system that a lot of people are very angry about, and it gets heated and it gets passionate, and I think that level of honesty really scares people, because in most city council meetings, most, all these other things, not to point out the city, but just in most of these governmental things, there isn't that level of brutal honesty of just, this is what happened, this is how I felt, this is why I believe it's wrong. And we would let anyone do that. And I think in a way that scares some people off, but the majority of people it empowers, and that's really what it's about, is coming together on where we can find common ground, what we can be connected by.
Do you see that there could be a couple of steps beyond what you just outlined? Those being, this is what happened, this is what I feel about, this is what I think should be done about it, here's what I'm doing, you can help me. Right? Because it's part of the criticism that gets leveled at youth, having had it leveled at me, is you don't know, you're not old enough, you're, as I talked about before we went on camera, callow youth, right? Or, the old, what happened to you, for example, was the old adage, old age and treachery will overcome youth and skill every time.
It's that mentality precisely that has been dividing the youth from the elders.
And what we really focus on is a level of intergenerational evolution almost, because there has been that divide. And yes, if you've been here for 20 years longer than me or however many years longer than me, you have, a level of wisdom, a level of experience that is beyond mine, and I will respect that. But also, if I've grown up in a culture that is very different than you, my parents, their parents, we've all grown up in almost, not completely different cultures, but very different. The times they are changing. And so it's really finding that value in everyone's experience. And that's what we're trying to work on, is that bond of intergenerational work, which I think is the only way to really not as much combat, but just work towards a common good. Because to solve these problems, like, yes, we have people up on the mic that say, this is what happened to me, this is why I think it's wrong, and they go on a rant about it, but it's also trying to find that connection with, did you know that this is someone in the community that you can talk to about that very issue? Or did you know that this older man experienced the same thing, only, with Vietnam, or only with, you know what I mean? And so it's really finding that way that we can come together and learn together to grow as a community and as a whole, because even if we're different ages or races, et cetera, we're all humans, and coming out together on that humanity level is pretty huge.
In terms of, you kind of answered my next question about some of your activities and why is this project important. So let's look at the next one. How do people get involved with it?
The biggest way that we get new blood in is through the word of mouth is really large, and also with our open mic, we leave that open. A lot of people learn about it through that. We also have a website, which is www.waynemorrisnow.org, that is in the works. We have a couple of youth working on making it represent us better, because right now, quite honestly, it doesn't. We also have a MySpace, which is Morse Youth, on myspace.com. That's MORSE. And email is a good way to get involved, or to get linked in with Ishi and myself. Ishiana@comcast.net will reach both of us. That's ISHIANA@comcast.net. And really, involvement is something that almost we have to pick out of the crowd. That when we go to shows, we go to places, we see people that are interested when we're talking about, we're passing out flyers, we're talking about what we're doing. And if we see a spark of interest, then, this is how you can get involved. And we try to keep it open and relaxing, and that you don't have to make a huge commitment. A lot of people are really, really busy, because that's the culture that we live in. And so whatever level of involvement people are comfortable with is what they can bring to the table. And that's really respecting, I can bring co-managers, so I can do a lot of the brunt of the work, really.
Logistical work. And
most of the logistical stuff with, all the somewhat boring things they just need to get done, and I'll bring a lot to the table that way. But if all you can do is come to a show, or if all you can do is paint a picture to donate for, fundraising, or, whatever it is that people can do, is really their level of involvement is up to them, and, we can offer it, but that's, it's a personal choice, really.
Do you have a study guide?
A study guide for the program in general, or
Well,
books to read? Is that what you mean?
yeah, I guess books to read, civics, conversational bureaucraties, how you can get involved, because,
Right.
it's Wayne Morris, right? And so he was a lawyer, he was involved with words. When you talk about civics, like we were talking about earlier in, the broadcast about, well, you need to know the history, you need to know some of that stuff. And if, obviously, if you're a product of, the Eugene area school system, and if you didn't get that, then that means that you have to get it on your own. And I know that you have some family history that, basically emphasizes getting your own education and not trusting mainstream systems to do that. And a lot of youth are in that position of, the reason that we're often having problems with youth is because they've been pushed to the fringes of society. Not that they've voluntarily chosen that, but they have been pushed there. And so then how do they make their way back to the mainstream? And they have to be able to speak the language, and that language isn't necessarily spitting on a mic. Because, unless they're doing violent gangster rap, they're not even going to get a record deal, right? So, I know that's not, you're a spoken word artist, so I know that's not what you're about, certainly, in terms of your reputation in the community. But, there has to be, at some point.
You could start by picking up the Constitution. Definitely.
Okay.
Study
The Constitution is good.
History of the United States by Howard Zinn.
Mm-hmm.
Pick that up.
The People's History
People's
of the United
history.
States of
People's
America.
history.
People's
Okay.
history.
1492 to present day, I think, is the full
So
title.
you also might want to take a look at the South African Constitution, too. Because, remember, for those of us, well, in this room and also staffing, the control room, the Constitution as written did not apply to us.
Yeah.
Okay? And the South African Constitution does apply to every human being, period. No discussion, end of discussion. Everybody. It looks like it was written in Eugene, in terms of support of gay marriage and, if you're disabled, and 16 official languages, none of this English-only stuff.
Yeah.
So, that is something that we could look at moving towards, but you would have to read it to do that. And if you depend on your school system to teach you that, you're going to be waiting a long time.
Right. Well,
Now-
it's just the same as like the human rights, the Bill of Human Rights, that, of course, America hasn't adopted yet. Who knows why? If you read it, it makes pretty basic sense. Everyone should have their basic needs and respect. But, it's like there's something that's really important that we focus on, which is, like Ishi said, the Constitution. No, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, all these things, have the amendments down, understand them. Yes, even if it was written in a time that, it doesn't apply to us, and which is somewhat ridiculous, like we were saying, how we have to translate it to youth times, or to not necessarily youth times, but just current times. But by really knowing those elements of our history, these are the rights that bind us, that this, to really know where you can fit in, so that you can figure out just really what you can do as far as power goes in this government, in this culture, in this society. So I think that it's definitely good. Yeah, learn the South African Constitution. Verse yourself on the Bill of Human Rights and all of these other things that other countries are doing, other cultures are doing. But if we don't really know the workings of our own system, even if we don't believe in it, like I think our system has failed many people. But I still want to learn about it just so that we can figure out how to change it. Because if we're not educated on the entirety of the system, we're never going to be able to get our foot in the door to change it. It's much more powerful when you can, pull out this part of the Constitution, or you can quote this and this, because it's that level of education that gives you respect. Because as young people, you're not going to get it. I walk into, my senator's room or whatever, and they're barely going to look at me. It happened to me when I was in D.C., and he looked at me finally when I said, hey, this is my question, but as many of us...
Who was your question directed to?
Senator Wyden.
Okay.
Yes, and I mean, this is something that not to pull out senators, you know, but in pretty much not any, but a majority of the situations I have been in where I'm talking to elders that are in a position of power, is they kind of give you that, oh, that's great, you know, that's a good idea.
Pat you on your shoulder and send you on your way.
Yes, I mean, I have a valid question, and you know, I'm a real person, I have a valid question, I have a valid solution maybe, or I'm offering my facilitational skills as a youth organizer, as a person of color, as, you know, all of these X, Y, and Z. And
Categories.
All these categories, exactly. And often they take it and they say, good job. I'm glad that you can speak for yourself. And they don't give that respect.
Now shut up.
Exactly. Now shut up. What are you doing trying to mess with our system? What are you doing trying to give me more work when really all I'm asking for is a little bit of respect, a little bit of responsibility that I can, you know, show to the youth that I'm working with, or that, you know, my peers, and say, here, they have given us the respect and the responsibility to work with them on this issue, to come to the table, to organize youth, or, you know, I mean, we can do the work if you let us.
We're doing it regardless of anything that they're doing for us. We need their support, but we're all in this together, and this is something that, you know, if we don't start now and get on that, you know, bridging the gap and peaceful transition of power, then we're in for a rude awakening. I really believe that.
And that peaceful transition of power is something that Victor Stathakis has told us so many times. He's everybody's uncle. Uncle Victor, we call him. He's the one I told you. He's the chair of our board, and he's also he knew Wayne Morris. He was the co-founder of the program back in '92 or '93, and he says that over and over again. And what we need is a peaceful transition of power to the youth, which is the idea that, yes, we need to work together. And that straight up, you know, in 10 to 20 years, everybody our age is going to be doing all the jobs that everybody your age is doing now. That's how it works. You can't change it. But there's this energy in this culture of holding on to all of this. I mean,
an exclusion from the youth.
Exactly.
From including them into their future, you know, including them into the building of some of these huge monuments in town, you know, like the new federal building. Quite frankly, I know it sounds bad, but it looks like a refrigerator to me. And so, you know, that's an eyesore for me. And it's a great thing that we should all be a part of.
They need to invite people to the table. And I mean, there's these things that are in the institution of this government and this society. I mean, like, you can't be president until you're 35, you know? And it seems like you can't be president unless you're a white Christian male, but you know, just having that ageism built in. And that's why, for me, youth empowerment is so important, because youth are dealing with all of the isms. You know, we got sexism, we got racism, we got homophobia, we got all of these things, but at the same time, we're also lesser citizens, and we really, I mean, it's true, you know. I'm 19, I can vote now, but still I can't go see music at a bar, even though I don't even drink, you know. It's this this kind of a conundrum, and it's this ageism that is just accepted because, you know, you're young and you don't know as much, and that it's just kind of assumed ignorance.
Well, it's there's generally more to it than just ageism. It could be, you know, the dead hand of history, as it were. You know, I mean, I remember, again, from being a youth activist, campaigning for the 18-year-old vote when I was in middle school and wouldn't be voting. So the fact that you can enjoy an 18-year-old vote instead of 21 is due to people, you know, who are working, you know, when I was in middle school, and I myself being one of those, you know, signing petitions at the mall. Oh, isn't that cute?
Thank you for that.
You know, but, you know, sorry for the rest of the world that we bequeathed on you, because, again, when Victor talks about the peaceful transition to power, one of the things that you have to look at yourself is the fact that you're going to have to empower yourself by educating yourself, because some of the backroom deals are taking place around you and in spite of you. So, for example, one of the things that I saw, I was reading at lunch today, and today's in the current weekly, 2 articles that were side by side, more or less. One was a transcript by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right, who talked about the influence of corporations on government, and a civil rights attorney, Eldon Rosenthal. So I suggest you read those and have your young friends read that too. Because what Rosenthal talked about is saying, look, the Bill of Rights is like a fulcrum. Okay? It can either be sitting in the middle of the room or on the side somewhere, but you need a lever to get your rights. Your rights aren't just granted to you just because this thing is sitting in the middle of the floor. You need to pry your rights loose.
Well, we challenge
And you
them.
need to make it cost them, or else they're not going to act, okay? So I've had the same experience with Ron Wyden as an adult, as a person of color, working on issues of, okay, people of color are being denied access to drug treatment and are being arrested, okay, instead of going to drug treatment for the same offense.
Right.
So what are you going to do about that, right? Oh, nice, thank you for your concern. Here's my AIDS card. Boom, all right? So I was at a town hall with him, right? So if you represent a voting bloc, and i.e. money, they'll listen to you, right? So power concedes nothing without a demand, so they have to recognize, you have to speak to them in the language of power and do things that, will influence negatively their power so that they'll act. I mean, that's cynical, but that is the reality.
But it's interesting because we do represent a huge voting bloc that doesn't vote. I mean, in my district, when they were voting for county commissioners, I talked to the man that got elected, Bill Fleenor, and he said that the people that aren't voting in my district are 18-year-old minorities. And I'm like, okay, well, hey, I'm an 18-year-old minority, I'll vote for you. But it's interesting because here we are representing hugely, like the youth vote is something that is not out there nearly as largely as it could be. A lot of people aren't voting. And even though we represent that, oftentimes you get the same thing where they feed you, just like you said you just experienced. They say, oh, good job, excellent question, that's great, but we're not actually going to do anything about it. And they kind of feed you this compliment to get you to forget your point in a way. Oh, a senator, liked what I said, yippee, but is that actually going to create change? Probably not.
Probably not. So, it gets back to what that old guy Gandhi said about
being the change
you want to see in the world. Like your probable ancestors basically dealt with. Slaves have to free themselves. You can't wait on the system to give you your freedom. You have to take it yourself.
But those of you who have the freedom and the education should also be more obligated in helping the people who are less fortunate and giving them the opportunity to speak. Because a lot of these people who are uneducated are people, I don't like to say these people because we're all one. We're all in it together. They're not given that. And so that's what we need to do. We need to give them the opportunity.
And that's why, in Eugene, that's what we're really trying to work on is, getting support for our program. And that's really what all the programs that are doing good things need financial stability. Don't have that. Ishi and I have put in countless hours, and we've gotten paid a lick. He still, has to do construction to pay the bills, even though he's a talented musician and youth organizer. But these fields aren't respected in this culture. So it's kind of what we keep asking every time we have any speaking engagement and anything. We just keep on kind of putting it to the community of Eugene to say, I know there's people out there that have steady jobs, that have money that they can contribute, or have time they can contribute, or have, there's something, and that's really what it takes. Is like, we can do the legwork, but there's a level of support and a foundation that the community has to bring as a whole, whether that's city funding, whether it's individual sponsorship, even if it's not money, but there's that support that really needs to be brought together so that we can, fully create positive change in this community.
Can you talk a bit about your other day job in terms of positive youth development?
Yeah, I recently got a job as the Youth Outreach Coordinator for the Positive Youth Development Grant with the Lane County Department on Children and Families. And so it's essentially similar to what I'm doing with Wayne Morse, which is creating youth group, youth voice in the community. Positive youth development is a great thing in the government. Basically what it is what it says, positive youth development, working on empowering youth. through multiple different venues. And Oregon is one of the 9 states in the country that is funded by the Positive Youth Development Initiative. And so we have some grant money, and so we're working on a few different things, a leadership institute, a youth celebration. We're in the works to see if we can get some sort of mayoral youth council or some sort of youth advisory board to the city council, which is something that actually Ishi and I have talked to Kitty Piercy about as well, because really it's going to take a lot of involvement for that. But that's pretty exciting to actually get paid for the type of work that I do, which is obviously not the only reason, but it's pretty solid. So I'm trying to work out both the different youth programs, see where we can collaborate on different things, because really there's a lot of separations between all these different groups. There's a lot of positive groups in Eugene, and really figuring out how we can network the best is huge. And that's what Wayne Morse Youth Program, we're trying to really promote that, which is that level of networking and connection, and finding all the different talent, finding all the places that we can come together, because it's all of us.
You have a couple of events coming up. Switch to Elmo.
Yes, certainly do. It's our free speech open mic. We've taken it from the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza. Not taken it, I mean, we're going to be back there again on April 7th when the Saturday market starts again. But these 2 events, one at Cosmic Pizza on Friday, March 23rd, which is this Friday. That'll be an open mic venue where if you come at 6:30, you can go ahead and sign up. And there'll also be some of our local talent, our band's playing. Ishi is the maestro. It's a gumbo of lots of different local talent. And Wow Hall on the 30th, which is not this Friday, but the following Friday, will be not an open mic venue as much, but actually a selection of all the different local talent that have been a part of open mic, or that that we've just kind of spotted, and so it'll be a little bit more of a live production. It's a fundraiser. We're trying to get a free speech mobile, solar-powered sound system that we can take around to the community to bring free speech everywhere with peaceful power to empower the youth, no matter whether it's at a school or a park or anything. So we're working on that project, and hopefully with these 2 shows, if we get a good showing and people come out and donate a little bit, whatever they can, we can get that project really happening.
All right. So we have about 2 minutes left, and so that means that you actually have time for closing statements, like, for example, if you want to just give a 45-second, what are some of the issues in summation?
Well, the issues that are facing youth, there's so many. The biggest one is the climate, and that's the one thing that I think that this generation I'm hearing yelling out more and more and more. Global warming, global dimming, these things are real, these things are necessary for change, and really keeping all these alternative technologies, making them accessible. This is what this generation needs, because at this point, most people my age don't think we can have kids, don't feel like that's allowed, because why would you want to have kids when they're just going to die in some famine, So really working on that, I honestly believe, I've seen all the movies and everything as well, but I believe that we can make that positive change. We just got to work for it. We got to keep that positive hope alive, and enough of us working together, we can figure out how everybody can live happily on this planet. Undying faith in that, and that's, I think, the biggest issue that affects not only youth, but everyone.
Pretty much everything she just said, but empowerment, empowerment, empowerment. Empower the youth. Give them the opportunity. Let them be heard, because it's our future. It's it's your future too, but it's our future. We're gonna have to clean up the mess. So give us the opportunity to make some of these decisions, and let us in on some of them.
Intergenerational.
No backroom deals.
Unless you've got youth back in the background.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Ishi Medeiros Woods and Deanna Matthews Harris from the Wayne Morse Youth Program. Thank you for coming. This has been DiversiTV. We will be returning the 2nd week of April, I believe, in spring term for another round of DiversiTV, another 8 or actually 9 episodes. One more. So we hope to see you then, and until then, have a good spring break for those of you who are having spring break. And don't necessarily just take a youth to lunch, but read a youth a book, or give a book to a youth to read, so that they may be empowered.
Thank you very much.